SPUFalcons.com. Here with Seattle Pacific rowing coach Keith Jefferson. Coach, your team starts, have a home regatta against PLU, the annual duel, here on the Lake Washington Ship Canal. Your thoughts about that?
It's always good spin up. It's particularly good that it's at home. We're hoping for better weather than we had last year with our home meet. But yeah, it's good too that it's just a duel. It's a very low-key event. PLU has sometimes given us a hard time, particularly in the eights. But so it's good for us. It's a good balanced kind of event. We, particularly for the men, we don't emphasize our eights a lot. But they've got a new coach there who's from the UW. He's all eights. They've only got 9 guys though, so there may be some good parity. Division III, they've only been on the water since the 5th or 6th or so of February. So we've got the water time on them a little bit, but sometimes that doesn't matter so much. So again, it should be a good mix. We should do well in the small boats, is my guess, and they get challenged in the first 2 races, the 2/8s.
Right. First race of the season. Obviously, your team has trained for several months. Can you simulate the racing experience in practice, or will this be a real novel thing for some of your first-year rowers?
Yeah, that's a big deal for me. One of my, training, axioms is train like you fight, and I try and duplicate it just as much as possible in the training scenario. But as everybody who's competed ever will tell you, you can't simulate butterflies in your stomach. You can't the jitters. And so all of that becomes a big factor in the first race, right? And I'll do stuff to create stress at the starting line and do all kinds of things to them to try and elicit that, but you can't duplicate it. You just can't duplicate it, an actual opponent. And so it's a big deal. And usually where that relates to is how cleanly they row. Some of them fall apart, and some of them hold it together. Usually all of them pick up their stroke rate a beat or two. Some of them have difficulty settling down after the starting sequence. So it's a kind of a crapshoot, but we've got such a high component of novices in our crews that it really does. It kind of remains to be seen how well they stay disciplined throughout these races. So, but it's a good primer. It's a good opener for us.
You mentioned the novices. Let's talk about the men's 8. You'll have 4 rowers who are new to collegiate rowing. Talk about your 8 and just how the men have looked in practice so far.
Well, again, this is because we focus on the small boats so much, this is not a combination we've rowed a lot. In fact, only a few times really in the winter. We actually rowed the 8 more back in the fall. This is a group who's done well. They pulled hard. They figured out the training, and have relatively stayed uninjured. So that gets to be a big key for early on boatings in the first place. Is who's not injured. But yeah, it's a good group, and I'm excited to see how they do. But again, it's not our emphasis, so it's hard to determine. But again, we've got relative parity in terms of team size with PLU, so I hope it's a good race.
Okay. For those not familiar with rowing, what would be the biggest difference if a rower's been in a 4, training and all, and then in an 8? What's the biggest difference between rowing in a 4 and an 8?
Well, certainly stability. 4 is obviously going to be a narrower hull, and most of your center of gravity and your center of buoyancy, believe it or not, is much, or your center of gravity is higher than your center of buoyancy. So it's a very tippy platform anyways. And then in a 4, it's even narrower, and so it gets to be a high skill game when you're the smaller the boat. The bigger the boat, slightly less skill and more just a hammer on it. Though your technique is always important, obviously. It's just harder to get, for that matter, 8 people all together doing exactly the same thing. So you've kind of got different skill components going into an 8 as opposed to a 4. but generally speaking, the 4 is just more difficult to row well because it's so tippy. But the 8's more of a power game.
Talking about the 8 on the women's side, you obviously row 4s as well, but you do focus on an 8. How is that group shaping up, and the women in general? How are they looking so far?
Well, this season we've had our share of injuries, and that's had an impact on us for sure. The women are again high component of novices in the group. Lots of inexperience, and so that's been it's been a bit of a problem getting the speed we need. And actually, it's just an 8 this year. We don't have enough for an 8 and a 4, which is the D2 format. But the group not only so is small in numbers, but we also have got a slightly smaller in physical stature crew, and that's also made it difficult to get some speed going. So we've been struggling for speed. I won't lie, and yet it's early on. We saw a significant improvement just 2 days ago on the water, and so you just hope for the continuing training. We have weeks left of training, and so they presumably haven't even come close to their peak yet. So that's my hope, is that they'll knock off another 30 seconds at least to be competitive. But again, there's a constant struggle for experience in this group, so that's what this weekend is about for them as well.
Right. Well, in the past, you've done a wonderful job essentially taking rowers with no experience and grooming them into very good rowers by the end of their career. What is it, if someone has not had any crew experience, what qualities are something that translate into rowing that would project to make a good rower?
Well, yeah, the qualities go with character more than any other component. I've pretty much been forced throughout my years to give up kind of a general physical standard. I've just been surprised by too many amazing people who were either small or whatever. You just didn't think they had the potential, and yet they proved invaluable, even to the 8. So it's mostly character. This is a work sport. It's 95% work, and so you really need those kinds of people who are willing to do the work, who are willing to work smart as well as hard. You don't want them overtraining, which is something that happens in this sport frequently, and you don't want them injured. But again, they have to love to work, and work is fun. That's what I've told them, right? If you're in this deal because work is fun for you, then you're in the right place. And so that's really it. It's that work ethic. It's the quality of character that's willing to do what it takes. And some people, you can develop that in more. I have to have some level of it, though, when they get here. They have to have some measure, and so I usually am good to thank their parents, the ones that I have good good work ethics for. But most anybody can get this sport. Almost anybody can pick up this sport fairly quickly. But if you are not ready to sacrifice on a work level, then it's going to be a very difficult combination.
Great. Thank you very much.